This is a Panther Option B video detailing the installation of the main gun and the gun shield. So start out here by taking the gun that we previously carved and just slightly sharpening or tapering the back side of it just to make insertion into the turret a little bit easier and through the gun shield. And we're going to next round the gun shield a little bit, but because of this front part here, the shot deflector for the bottom, we're going to have to do it like fold this flat against the front so that it doesn't get rounded, and then round just this part. So that should prevent it from being included in the main rounding. And just use a skewer to round it. And it may take a little while before you get a nice rounding, just because this small part here does affect it a little bit. Try to get it even. And you can just test it against the gun base there to see if it's enough. So you can see how that's going to work. There's a little bit of separation between them. Okay, now that we've got that rounded, actually we're going to have to flatten it again, but it's best to round it first because it rounds a lot more evenly before you drill these holes, which is the next thing we're going to do. I'm going to start this central one with a 1/8 bit, but I'm going to finish it with a 1/16 bit, just so that the gun goes in tightly, because sometimes the skewer size is a little bit smaller than 1/8. So I went most of the way through with a 1/8, and then I just finished it with a 1/16, and that should just push this through a little bit here. Make this nice and tight around the gun. Alright. So just a couple more holes to drill here, but they're smaller. So just use the 1/16 bit. Now these are going to look a little bit more ragged than we're going to want them at the end. But that's fine. You can fix them up later with round toothpicks. So we're just going to bore them out now. The most important thing to keep in mind is to try to keep them nicely lined up with each other, because you will notice that later. So try to get right on the mark. And if you've noticed that one of the holes you drilled is slightly off the mark, then try to follow that off the markedness with the other holes. One on the other side here. Now, at any time, you can just take a round toothpick and just push that in through these holes, and that'll make them nicer. And then once you've got a layer of 4:1 glue on there, that effect will stay as well. But it's not going to stay now because it's all just paper and stuff. So we're just going to re-round this again. Be a lot easier now. And now, just push this through. You decide the elevation that you want with your gun. So level or elevated are your options. I mean, you can have it slightly depressed, but you're gonna probably have to maybe remove a little bit of the shot trap if you want to have it very depressed. It's really, I don't think the gun depression was very good, or very far anyways. But if you're like setting up a diorama and you're on a slight slope, firing from hull down position or something like that, you might want to have a slightly depressed gun elevation. So what we're going to try to do now is you want to decide your elevation. I'm going to go for straight and level. So you kind of fix that in position and then make sure from the top that it's even on both sides. Like there's a bit of an overlap between the gun shield and the gun base. So you want to confirm that that overlap is even, and then just hold it in place with your fingers. Make sure that it looks like it's at about the right elevation. Then use a pencil to just mark. Check one last time, this is all lined up nicely. Just mark on the gun base. So that looks like it's going to be low to me. So I just want to confirm that that's the right spot. Yeah, okay. So in this area, anyways, it can give you a good idea, and definitely you'll find the center as long as this is centered. So be careful about that. Now I'm just going to use the 1/16 bit to push through here. Again, because I want a tight fit. And what you want to keep in mind is, like, no, it's not as important when you're pushing through the gun base, but we're going to go all the way through the gun base and in through the turret to provide stability for the gun. So once you've got through the gun base, you're going to want to make sure that you're maintaining the elevation. So if you want to have it elevated, you'd want to pierce through in this sort of direction. If you're having it depressed, you want to pierce through in sort of like this direction. If you're going for straight and level, then you want to make sure that you're straight and level. And also side to side, very important. I think it's easier to modify the up-down than it is to modify the side to side. So once you've got everything set up, be careful to maintain that angle of attack and pierce through the rear material into the turret. Okay. So now we want to use a bit of a skewer to enlarge that hole a little bit. Okay. Now, take your gun and test fit it. This is why we sharpened it a little bit in the beginning, to make sure that it's coming out straight from the turret. Now this is coming out nice and straight and pretty level enough. So I'm happy with that placement. So now we can set it in the gun shield. Now you're going to leave a little bit of space between where this final expansion happens and the gun shield. About the same amount of space as between these red lines here on the gun shield. It's a little bit less. That will be covered later with some material, but for now we're just going to leave it slightly exposed there. And you can modify this angle later, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Mostly what you want to worry about right now is the shape of the gun shield is nicely rounded. So you can see how it looks a little bit square on that side. So I'm going to take this apart here and just make this a little bit nicer and more evenly round. Now sometimes you might get delamination, like these layers of cardboard will pull apart. It's worth it to take the time to re-glue them together if that happens, because it doesn't look quite right later. I mean, you can fix it later on, but it's easier to fix it now, is all. Okay, so now when you're satisfied with the shape of the gun shield, reinsert this gun. And one final test fit. Now there's going to be a slight gap between the gun shield and the gun base. You want to have it even. The gun shield's technically supposed to be able to move up and down as the gun elevation changes. And then just test that on the body of the tank to make sure gun elevation looks right. Looks a little bit depressed, but that's okay. It's not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this. Now the other thing you want to make sure is that this is centered. Looks a little bit off, actually. I don't know where the fault in that lies, but I'm just going to expand. You take care of that by just sort of using your 1/8 bit here, almost like a file on the one side you want to move it towards. And you can do that to change the elevations and stuff like that as well. But I just want to have the gun shield be properly centered. Looks a little better. Don't know how much I moved it actually. Might have to use this. And then once you've got it started, you can expand the side that you want to move it towards with one of these. And these are quite strong now, so you can use quite a bit of pressure actually. A surprising amount of pressure. So don't be too afraid to really crank on it if you need to move your... See, now I'm looking a lot more centralized. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so now that I'm satisfied, I'll take some 4:1 glue. And I'm going to remove this slightly, and then put some glue on the front here, and push it in a bit so the gun bonds to the gun shield nicely. And then I'll put some glue in this hole. Try to get this all nicely set up. And just want to remove any excess glue around this area and make sure I'm not plugging up these holes. So as you see, it's a fairly even gap on that side, same gap on the other side. Nicely centered. Try to keep it even on both top and bottom. Not always that easy to do. And we've got a gun shield for the option B. There we go. Gun installed.